Welcome to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here today because we're going on a totally invisible, microscopic safari. We're zooming way, way in to explore a hidden world that exists all around us. I'm talking about in every single drop of pond water, every lake, and every ocean. It's a world packed with bizarre shapes, ruthless microscopic hunters, and some truly ingenious survival mechanisms. But before we dive into the microscope, let me ask you a quick riddle. What do you call a living thing that isn't a plant, an animal, or a fungus? You know, in biology, we absolutely love to neatly categorize things. We know exactly what a plant is, we know what a fungus is, and we definitely know what an animal is. But nature? Well, nature doesn't always play by our rules. There's an entire group of organisms that completely defies these neat little boxes. We're talking about the ultimate biological rule breakers. Get a load of this dazzling array of diatoms sampled straight out of the Connecticut River. These incredibly intricate, almost glass-like structures belong to the protists. Now, protists are a wildly diverse group of organisms that are mostly unicellular and microscopic. They come in just an astonishing variety of shapes and sizes. And, as we're going to see, their everyday behaviors are just as diverse as how they look. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The biological misfits. 2. The protist menu. 3. The drifters meet plankton. 4. The movers animal like protozoa. And finally, number 5. Microsurvival strategies. All right, let's jump straight into part 1. The biological misfits, the rule breakers of the kingdoms. What's really fascinating here is that this highlights a major biological anomaly. Usually, when organisms are grouped into a kingdom, like say the animal kingdom, it means they all share a single common ancestor. But protists? They are way more diverse than that. They're actually descendants of several completely different ancestral forms. In fact, in the scientific community, Kingdom Protista has historically acted like biology's giant junk drawer. Basically, if a microscopic organism has complex cells but doesn't quite fit the strict definition of a plant, an animal, or fungus, it just gets tossed right into the protist drawer. Moving on to part 2, the protist menu, how to eat like a protist. Because they come from so many different ancestral backgrounds, protists have evolved to get their food in completely different ways. There are 3 main strategies we see. First, you've got the ingestive protists. These are your animal-like heterotrophs. They actually have to consume other organisms to survive. Then we have the photosynthetic protists. These are the plant-like autotrophs that literally use sunlight to make their own food. And finally, the absorptive protists, which are fungus-like heterotrophs that just absorb nutrients straight from their environment. I mean, they truly cover all the bases of the biological menu. Let's get into section 3, the drifters. Meet plankton. So the absolutely crucial point I want you to take away from this is a massive misconception. When most people hear the word plankton, they immediately picture a specific, tiny species of bug-like creature. But plankton is not a taxonomic term at all. It literally just means floater. It describes any organism that drifts or floats in the water and is fundamentally unable to control its own movement against ocean or river currents. It's a lifestyle, guys, not a species. Just consider the extreme contrast here. You've got what you probably picture when you think of plankton, a tiny, microscopic drifter. But then you have a massive, glowing jellyfish. Because that massive jellyfish cannot actively swim against the ocean's strong currents and merely drifts along with them, it is technically considered plankton. It's kind of mind-blowing when you realize plankton is just a blanket term for the passive floaters of the aquatic world. Now, within this drifting lifestyle, we have 2 major factions. First up, we have phytoplankton. These are the plant-like photosynthetic drifters, and they're incredibly important because they conduct a huge, significant portion of the entire world's photosynthesis. They're the primary producers. On the flip side, we have zooplankton. These are the animal-like drifters. They are the consumers of the microscopic aquatic world. They eat the phytoplankton, and they can be either herbivorous or totally carnivorous, much like the animals we're familiar with up here on land. But not all protists just drift around aimlessly. That brings us to section 4, the movers, animal-like protozoa. Take a look at these fascinating, glowing, pill-shaped organisms. Protozoa is a specific group within the protist kingdom that are distinctly animal-like. And why is that? Because they are heterotrophic, meaning they have to actively hunt and consume other organisms for nutrients. And, unlike plankton, they actually have the ability to move under their own power. Most of them are aquatic, none of them have cell walls, and they're out there actively propelling themselves through their environment to track down their next meal. But remember, we're talking about the rule breakers here. Meet the euglena. These are freshwater protists that completely blur the lines. They are photosynthetic, which makes them very plant-like.
But they have this incredible adaptation, an eye spot. Now, this eye spot can't form actual visual images, but it can detect light, which helps the organism find the optimal sunny spot for photosynthesis. And to actually travel to that sunny spot, they actively swim using a whip-like tail called a curved flagellum. They are the ultimate hybrid. It's like a plant-like solar panel equipped with an animal-like motor.
Which brings us to our final section, number 5. Microsurvival strategies, mechanics of the microscopic world. When we stop and consider how mechanically complex a single cell can be, it's pretty staggering. Behold the inner workings of a paramecium, which is an extremely specialized predator. The outside of its elongated cell is covered in these tiny, moving protein filaments called cilia. The paramecium uses these cilia to literally twist and swim through the water. But the cilia serve a double purpose. Along the side of the cell is an indentation called the oral groove. The cilia actually sweep water and trapped food particles directly into this groove, acting exactly like a microscopic vacuum cleaner. Once trapped, the food gets enveloped into a food vacuole to be digested. And speaking of getting a meal, let's talk about the amoeba. To hunt, the amoeba performs this wild process called phagocytosis. It chemically alters its own internal cytoskeleton, causing its cytoplasm to flow outward, extending these arm-like sections called pseudopodia, or false feet. It reaches out, completely surrounds its prey, and traps it inside a newly formed food vacuole. It literally shapeshifts its entire body just to swallow its target whole. But life in a single cell isn't all just about hunting. Sometimes it's about not exploding. Yes, exploding. For unicellular organisms living in fresh water, there is a constant, deadly threat. Because of a process called osmosis, water is continuously entering their cells. Coupled with the water they accidentally swallow while eating, the cell rapidly fills up. If they don't do something about it fast, the cell will simply swell up and burst. To solve this, these ingenious little microbes evolved a highly specialized organelle called a contractile vacuole. You can think of it exactly like a bilge pump on a sinking ship. This structure constantly works to collect the excess water filling up the cell and physically pumps it right back out into the environment. This relentless pumping regulates their water balance and prevents cell lysis, which is just the scientific term for the cell rupturing. It's an exhausting, never-ending mechanical battle just to stay intact. And when conditions get truly harsh, say the water dries up or the temperature suddenly drops, many protists have another amazing trick up their sleeve. An active feeding giardia can essentially shapeshift. It transforms into a durable, armored cyst so it can go dormant and outlast the bad conditions. Furthermore, to survive long-term evolutionary threats, they use a process called conjugation to swap genetic material and increase their overall diversity. They are just incredible survivalists. Beyond just surviving alone, many protists are absolute masters of teamwork. They engage in these brilliant symbiotic relationships. For example, did you know that termites can't actually digest the wood they eat? It's completely true. Their guts are completely dependent on a specific protozoan called trichonympha that lives right inside them. It's the protist that actually breaks down the tough cellulose in the wood, making the nutrients available to the termite. Without that microscopic protist, the termite would literally starve while eating a house. Which really brings us to our final thought. These microscopic misfits, the protists, are so often out of sight and out of mind. But from providing a termite the ability to recycle wood, to acting as the foundational food source for the entire ocean, to producing a massive amount of the oxygen you and I are breathing right this second, they are the invisible gears turning the machinery of our planet. So I'll leave you with this question to ponder. If these invisible, rule-breaking misfits didn't exist, how drastically would the web of life on Earth collapse? Thank you so much for joining me on this microscopic safari, and keep exploring.